On this day, 1955, Alfred Hitchcock's legendary pairing of Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, To Catch a Thief, opened in theaters.
My first bait will be this Mrs. Stevens, the American woman with the diamonds and the daughter.
How come you haven't made a pass at my daughter and don't say, oh, mother, to me?
You have a very strong grip, kind of burglar needs.
You don't have to spend every day of your life proving your honesty, but I do.
The proposition sounds intriguing, albeit a little unorthodox.
What happens to you if I'm caught?
I might be embarrassed, even censured.
They could put me away for good.
We're back, like we never left, in the car for a new episode of the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for taking this Monday afternoon drive with me home here in good old New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today marks, incredibly, the 69th anniversary of an Alfred Hitchcock classic. Not one of his all-timers. It's not on the level of Vertigo or Rear Window or Psycho or The Birds or North by Northwest or even Notorious or Shadow of a Doubt or The Lady Vanishes, for that matter, or Strangers on a Train or even Marnie. But a classic it is nevertheless. On this day, 1955, saw the release of Alfred Hitchcock's crime, thriller, comedy, romance, To Catch a Thief. And as the title implies, it is almost a literal title, and this isn't really even a spoiler because the movie is almost 7 decades old, but perhaps it takes a thief to catch a thief. Now, when people such as myself, but when general movie fans, people who are into movie history and not just, and there's nothing wrong with being more interested in current movies that are coming out later this summer, later in the year, Oscar bait. There's nothing wrong with being more focused on that than, for example, Alfred Hitchcock, Cary Grant, Grace Kelly. But for someone like myself, if I'm asked a question by a fellow historian or even somebody who is just interested, if they say, what does it mean when people discuss Cary Grant and in a certain role in a certain movie, they say, well, he's just playing Cary Grant? What that means to me is it suggests a role where he is witty, he is a lady killer, he is suave, he's debonair, always seems to have the answers. He's funny, but he just coasts through effortlessly on his charm. And the ultimate example of Cary Grant playing Cary Grant is Alfred Hitchcock's next film that he made with Cary, North by Northwest, which is hands down the most entertaining film that Hitch ever made. Another film where Cary Grant plays Cary Grant is his last real true leading man role, conventional leading man, romantic lead type, opposite Audrey Hepburn in Stanley Donen's phenomenal Charade in 1963. But he does Cary Grant in To Catch a Thief, although his character of John Roby is not in any way anything like either Peter Joshua or Adam Canfield, or Brian Cruikshank, the multiple names that he uses in the movie Charade. I won't spoil why he has so many names. Or Roger O. Thornhill, hard-charging, successful New York City advertising executive in North by Northwest. Well, actually, he's more like a super spy in that film, an unwitting James Bond kind of a character. But those are both men on the correct side of the law. John Roby was a cat burglar, and a very successful cat burglar at that. And he spent some time in prison, and now he is retired comfortably just off of the French Riviera and tends to a vineyard. life is pretty good for John Roby, who I guess he's supposed to be in his late 40s, I guess. I feel like Cary is playing his real age in this particular film, whereas 4 years later in North by Northwest, I think he's supposed to be in his early to mid 40s, and Cary was already, 52-ish with North by Northwest. To Catch a Thief it's a film about two movie stars, is how I would describe it. And the very successful, and he had a lot of big movies in the 80s and 90s, Scott Rudin, that was actually his quote. I didn't come up with that. Scott Rudin loved movie stars, and he loved to talk about movie stars and what it meant and what it took and all of this. And when he said a film is about two movie stars, it was another way of saying, don't get overly caught up in the plot. Don't focus too much on the mechanics of plot and twists and character arc. It's a film about two movie stars. It means enjoy them, because these people are not going to look like this forever. He was specifically talking about a film from the mid-90s called Up Close and Personal, which starred Robert Redford and Michelle Pfeiffer in a kind of old-fashioned cornball romance. I mean, I like it, but it's a film about two movie stars. It started off as a hard-hitting expose on the late female telejournalist Jessica Savage, and somehow it became Robert Redford and Michelle Pfeiffer making goo-goo eyes at one another. Because as Scott Rudin said, during the rewriting process by I think it was Joan Dunn who did that, and maybe even with her husband John Gregory Dunn, it just became about the leads. And To Catch a Thief, I can give you all kinds of, he's a cat burglar, the French Riviera, the police, they're convinced that he's back in action because there's a string of cat burglaries. And then you meet Grace Kelly as Frances Stevens, and her mom, played by the terrific, hilarious Jessie Royce Landis, who in this movie, I mentioned this on a North by Northwest podcast, but for those who missed that one, she is presented as a potential theoretical love interest to our charming Cary. But Cary, he opts for the daughter, aka Grace Kelly. But mechanics of plot are, there's a string of cat burglaries, and there's a lot of really rich people on the French Riviera, not surprisingly, or in fucking Monaco. What's going to happen? And what are the twists going to be? And is Grace Kelly also, is she a jewel thief? And is the cat back in action? Would Cary Grant really play a reformed cat burglar who just goes back to stealing jewels? You don't need to worry about any of that claptrap. There's a word that should come back into vogue. That used to be, in the 80s, used to see it all the time, claptrap. It means bad. It means pat. It means can, warmed over, not interesting. Claptrap, one word, just like it sounds. To Catch a Thief shows two of Hollywood's most glittering, and I almost mean that literally, two of Hollywood's greatest stars together in a romance. Not conventional romance. This is not really your normal 1 + 1 = 2 boy meets girl story. But the romantic component is important. And I know that Quentin Tarantino has had his moments where he kind of rips on Hitchcock. He said, well, he was using rear projection when he didn't need to. He had ideas that were a little bit outdated. Yeah, okay, no, that's true. But Alfred Hitchcock knew how to deploy his actors as well as anyone. As he famously said, do you consider your actors and actresses to be cattle? And he says, no, they should be treated like cattle. It's not this thing, he was kind of being a dick and he was being funny. But Hitchcock, with his reputation and the fact that even in the mid-50s, before his greatest period of, well, okay, I shouldn't say that. He had just made Rear Window. Many would argue that's his single greatest film. So he was in the middle of his greatest period. He was held in enormous esteem. That's another way of saying he got away with shit in this movie that I don't believe any other filmmaker would have gotten away with. You have Cary Grant and Grace Kelly both looking spectacular. Grace wearing a little bit of a plunging neckline. They're having like a picnic lunch. And just to hear Grace Kelly Ask him, would you like leg or breast? I mean, it's absolute gold. And I feel like if it's another filmmaker, that's not getting past, I don't even know if it was still called the production code, but I'm not so sure that they would get away with that. But Hitchcock's instinct always was, just go for it. If they tell me to remove it, fuck them. Let's just see what happens. And they didn't tell him to remove it. So there is a lot of dialogue in this movie. There are no bad words. They don't say the F word or the S word. They weren't allowed. But there is dialogue, and there is implied elements in that dialogue where you say to yourself, this is 1955? They're talking like this? How did this pass the censors? 2 words, Alfred Hitchcock. How did Hitchcock get Psycho through? I have no idea. Why didn't Michael Powell get Peeping Tom through? Why did Peeping Tom all but destroy Michael Powell's career? He was a director held in huge esteem. Yeah, but he was British. Oh. Hitchcock was the man. And nobody really wanted to fuck with him. He was making so much money for everybody. He was putting out one great movie after another. So he gets away with a lot of stuff. A lot of things that in the hands of not even lesser filmmakers, less renowned, less idolized filmmakers wouldn't have even attempted a line like what I just said. And it's pretty tame by 2024 standards, obviously. But back then, it just wasn't done. And 4 years later in North by Northwest, there's a scene on a train between Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint, relatively early in the film, where he literally says, well, she says something, I never think about love on an empty stomach. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We better eat something. Yeah, okay. But they get into a conversation, and he is saying words to the effect of, I need to be very careful if I am interested in a woman. I just need to be very careful that I have to pretend that I don't want to be more than friends with her. He doesn't say that. He goes further. And I remember the first time I saw that that's a 1959 film. Like, holy shit, I can't believe they're even allowed to say this in 1959. So Hitchcock, in his way, whether he was old-fashioned in other ways that he didn't keep up with the times, as Tarantino has occasionally pointed out. There are certain of his later films that say, Alfred could have done better. But he was always willing to go for broke and push when it came to following convention or saying, no, we're not going to follow convention. Hitchcock would always take the risks. That's how he made movies like Rope, where they told him, bro, you can't do this. Yeah, I'm doing it. And he wasn't necessarily angry, but he would be adamant. He says, no, I can do this. We're going to do nothing but 10-minute takes. It'll be 8 10-minute takes and a 7-minute take, and that's the movie. Don't worry about it. I know what I'm doing. So the dialogue is solid gold. Once Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, kind of, I don't want to say get together, but once they are in one another's path, and Jessie Royce Landis, who thinks she might be able to take a crack at Cary herself, is sort of relegated to the background, but not fully in the background. She's in way more of this film than she is in North by Northwest. And again, what I was saying, she's the love interest, a theoretical love interest here, and 4 years later, she plays Cary Grant's mom in North by Northwest. In that film, she is present for a lot of the first act, and then she more or less disappears. It's a little bit like the Barbara Bel Geddes character in Vertigo, who for large chunks of the film is almost a second lead to James Stewart's Scotty Ferguson or John Ferguson, and then at a certain point in the movie, she just disappears. You don't see her anymore. Essentially, the story of this film, of To Catch a Thief, is that there is a cat burglar, and because Cary falls under suspicion, there's a run out where he will get arrested and arraigned, even though we're pretty sure as the audience he's not doing it. And the way that he's coming across, well, it's not him. But if the shoe fits, it's like I mentioned in the podcast on the movie Angel Heart and Mickey Rourke's incredible performance, he's looking for a guy in that movie. Mickey Rourke, as Harold Angel, is looking for a man named Johnny Favorite who disappeared some time ago. And all of a sudden, there's a trail of dead bodies in his wake. Everyone that used to know Johnny Favorite is dead, dying, or soon to be dead. Well, did you kill him? No, I didn't kill him, but the cops might think I did. Everything's going to be pointing to him. Well, in To Catch a Thief, everything is pointing at Cary Grant. It looks like, even though we as the audience don't believe that he's really in it, even Grace Kelly and Jesse Royce Landis at a certain point in the film, they're convinced this motherfucker's back in action. So, not surprisingly, no spoilers, but the real jewel thief is exposed. And this film, it's the sort of, it might be marketed as a thriller. It's really not a thriller. It is a very relaxed atmosphere for the kind of film it is. And I've never seen anything else like it. It is in the ballpark, though, of movies I've discussed, such as Blade Runner, where if you just read the video box, well, not really video box, but if you read the description of Blade Runner, it sounds like a very exciting, like a sci-fi action thriller. It's not. It's more like a slow-burning film noir set in the future. If you read the description for Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation, it sounds really exciting. Oh, the plot involves murder and wiretapping and paranoia and secrets and government and all. Yeah, it is about all of those things, but it's not a thriller. It's a drama and a character study that has some thriller elements. Enemy of the State with Will Smith and the same Gene Hackman from The Conversation, that's a movie with the same basic plot, but that is actually an action thriller. So To Catch a Thief is a film, technically it is a crime thriller, a heist caper, but it's not really a thriller. It has some thriller elements, it has some mystery elements, who's the cat burglar, but ultimately it's a film about two movie stars. And it's important to note, a lot of contemporary people watching To Catch a Thief now will almost be stunned at how relaxed the atmosphere is. Because the story, it keeps feeling like it wants to be tighter and it wants to go up tempo the way North by Northwest. Once it hits the ground, it never stops. That movie, the kineticism is off the charts. But in this film, there is a slow, gradual build, but it is very methodically paced. Rear Window, another film that you would think that it's not very exciting, but Rear Window is intensely exciting for at least the last half hour, because you have no idea what the hell is going to happen there. So To Catch a Thief is also notable as it was the final film that Grace Kelly made. She was 25, going on 26, I believe, when this movie was released. August 5, 1955. She was born in 1929. Now, Grace Kelly didn't just simply retire from the movie business. While they were shooting this film on the French Riviera, Grace Kelly met Prince Rainier. They fell in love, and she got married. She married a prince. That's why, if you ever wondered, why was Grace Kelly known as Princess Grace? Was it a nickname? No! She really was a princess. Grace Kelly. But Alfred Hitchcock, to his last days, passed in 1980. It was unfortunate. His health wasn't great towards the end. He really wasn't able to work. He made a film, Family Plot, in 1976. Not really a fitting capper. And another thing with Tarantino, when he's talked about only wanting to make one more movie, he didn't say this, but he doesn't want to linger too long. And you look at Alfred Hitchcock's career, his last really great film is 13 years before his final film. His last, to me, truly great film is The Birds. A lot of people will put Marnie up with some of his other works. Marnie's pretty good. I like it. Also with Tippi Hedren, aka Melanie Griffith's mom. I don't love Marnie. I don't think it's that great. It's okay. Bruce Dern does his usual crazy shtick in that film. I don't love it. Torn Curtain with Paul Newman is a missed opportunity. Topaz is a missed opportunity. Frenzy is pretty good. Frenzy is the only R-rated kind of serial killer sort of thriller that Hitchcock was able to make. Wrong Man, that sort of thing. It's okay. it would have been better if that was his last film, because Frenzy, at least, is a movie that I would recommend to everybody if you like these kinds of, kind of graphic thrillers, even from the time of the early 1970s. But Hitchcock rued the day that he made a movie in Monaco because he lost his favorite star. And he attempted to get her to come back for Vertigo. Man, that would have been really interesting. And I have nothing against Kim Novak. I think Kim Novak is really good. And she took some criticism. But man, there's nothing wrong with her performance in Vertigo. To say that someone isn't Grace Kelly, that's really unfair. No shit. Nobody's Grace Kelly. There's only one. But he tried to get her for Vertigo. And I think he tried to get her, the last time he made an attempt was for Marnie. I'm pretty sure about that. I know he tried to get her back more than once. And she loved Hitch. She loved working with him. And Rear Window maybe is the movie she would be most proud of, even though she got more acclaim for other films like High Society. But it is unfortunate that Grace Kelly, 25, 26 years old, just walked away and never turned her, never went back. I remember when Grace Kelly died, I had not seen any of her movies at that point. I think she passed in 1929, so she was in her early 50s, I guess. It was tragic. I think she had a stroke while she was driving a car, or she had a heart attack. It was something terrible like that. And her niece was okay, but she passed. She was 53, maybe. Just awful. And the thing is, when you're a kid, I hate to say this, but when you're 8, 9 years old and somebody who is in their 50s dies, you don't question it. They're really old. Grace Kelly was really old. No, she wasn't. She should have had at least another 30 years. But I don't think she regretted it. I don't think she regretted her choices. Hitchcock regretted it, and the movie business at large and cinema history regrets it. But I don't think she had any. And I think she lived the life that she wanted to. So right now, To Catch a Thief is streaming free on Pluto, which is a free app with a shit ton of commercials. But if you happen to have Paramount Plus, it is streaming on Paramount Plus. It was a Paramount film, so it sort of makes sense. But it's worth seeing. If somebody asks me, give me some Cary Grant movies that I would like, I know who he is, but I don't know any of his films. I've heard of North by Northwest. I've never watched it. Well, the first one I would recommend to see is North by Northwest. But if you don't get that, let's say that you've never seen a Cary Grant film, but you happen to get Paramount Plus, To Catch a Thief is a good enough movie, and it gives you enough of the very unique Cary Grant star persona. It's worth it. I would say North by Northwest first, Charade second, Philadelphia Story third. That's an early one. Cary was very young in Philadelphia Story. He was mid-30s. To Catch a Thief, though, is definitely on that list for people who are interested in Cary Grant, interested in Alfred Hitchcock, but you don't want to, or maybe you've seen Psycho, or you've seen Vertigo, or Rear Window, or The Birds, and what's something else not in the horror genre? To Catch a Thief. It's a very leisurely, slow-moving thriller with two great stars, two of the great stars at the top of their game, even if the material is nothing like Notorious or Vertigo, Rear Window, North by Northwest, Strangers on a Train, Lady Vanishes, Shadow of a Doubt, or any of Hitchcock's other stupendous achievements, masterpieces. It's just a really good movie. It's 92% or 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, not by accident, and not just as a courtesy, well, we like Hitchcock, because you can find some of his movies that are like in the 50s and 60s. It's really good and super entertaining. And French Riviera looks fucking incredible. The film did win. It was nominated for a bunch of technical awards. It did win Motorcycle. It did win the Oscar for Best Cinematography. It is a gorgeous film to look at. Just the way the costumes are, the production design. It was a very confident production. They spared no expense, to quote John Hammond in Jurassic Park, spared no expense. The film looks great. And Happy 69th. That is fucking crazy. 69th anniversary to the release date of Alfred Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief. This has been episode 268 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for taking this ride home with me on this Monday night here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or the other platforms, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.